Right now, as you're listening to these words, I want you to understand something that most people spend their entire lives running from. There's a truth so powerful, so transformative, that when you finally embrace it, everything changes. That truth is this: the very thing you're trying to avoid, the pain you're desperately running from, the ending you're fighting against with every fiber of your being, that's exactly what you need to walk through to become who you're meant to be. I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there, maybe in your car, maybe at your desk, maybe lying in bed at 3 a.m. because sleep won't come, and you're thinking, easy for you to say. But here's what I need you to know about me, about this moment, about why these words matter more than any words you've heard in a very long time. I've been exactly where you are. I've felt that crushing weight in your chest, that feeling like you're drowning while everyone around you seems to be breathing just fine. The human experience, at its core, is about cycles. Everything in nature follows this pattern. Seasons change, tides rise and fall, day turns to night and back to day. Yet somehow we've convinced ourselves that our lives should be different. We've created this fantasy that if we just work hard enough, if we just think positive enough, if we just follow the right formula, we can skip the difficult parts. We can avoid the endings, sidestep the pain, and jump straight to the healing without doing the work. But here's what I've learned through my own journey through hell and back. That's not how transformation works. That's not how growth happens. That's not how you become the person you're capable of becoming. The universe doesn't operate on our timeline of convenience. It operates on a timeline of truth. And the truth is that every single thing that has ever mattered in your life has come through this process. Letting it end, letting it hurt, letting it heal, and letting it go. Think about it for a moment. Every relationship that needed to end, but you held on to it because you were afraid of being alone, that relationship was keeping you from the love you actually deserved. Every job that was slowly killing your soul, but you stayed because it was safe, that job was preventing you from discovering your true purpose. Every version of yourself that you've outgrown, but you keep trying to fit back into, like an old pair of jeans, that version is blocking you from stepping into who you're becoming. I remember the first time I truly understood this principle. I was at the lowest point of my life, sitting in my car outside a building I used to call home, knowing I could never go back inside. Everything I thought I knew about myself, everything I thought I had built, everything I thought was permanent, it was all crumbling around me. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could fight reality. I could deny what was happening. I could exhaust myself trying to force puzzle pieces that no longer fit together. Or I could surrender to what was already true. That word surrender, it terrifies most people. We think surrender means giving up, means being weak, means admitting defeat. But true surrender is the most courageous thing you can do. True surrender is looking at your life with complete honesty and saying, this chapter is over. This version of me has served its purpose. This dream, this relationship, this identity, it's time to let it go. When I finally made that choice, when I finally stopped fighting the ending that was already happening, something miraculous occurred. Not immediately. Don't misunderstand me. First came the pain, real, raw, bone-deep pain that felt like it might actually kill me. I'm talking about the kind of pain that makes you understand why people say heartbreak is a physical condition. So the kind of pain that makes you question everything you thought you knew about strength, about resilience, about your ability to survive. But here's what nobody tells you about that pain, about really letting yourself feel it instead of numbing it, avoiding it, or trying to fix it immediately. That pain is information. That pain is your nervous system recalibrating. That pain is old patterns breaking down so new ones can form. That pain is not your enemy, it's your teacher, your guide, your compass pointing you toward what matters most. I spent years of my life trying to avoid pain at all costs. I developed elaborate strategies, complex defense mechanisms, sophisticated ways of staying just comfortable enough to avoid growth. I surrounded myself with people who would never challenge me. I chose opportunities that were just risky enough to feel like progress, but safe enough that I'd never actually fail. I told myself stories about why I couldn't do the things I really wanted to do, why I couldn't be the person I really wanted to be, why I couldn't have the life I really wanted to live. And you know what all of that avoidance got me? A life that looked successful from the outside, but felt empty from the inside. A life where I was surviving, but not thriving. A life where I was existing, but not really living. A life where I was so busy trying to prevent endings that I never allowed new beginnings. The truth is, most of us are walking around as prisoners of our own comfort zones. We've built these elaborate cages of familiarity, and we've convinced ourselves that the cage is safety, when really, it's just another form of suffering. It's the suffering of potential unrealized, of dreams deferred, of a soul that knows it's capable of so much more, but keeps accepting so much less. Right now, I want you to think about your own life. What are you holding on to that you know needs to end? What situation are you staying in because leaving feels too scary, too uncertain, too painful? What version of yourself are you clinging to because the process of evolution feels too overwhelming? What pattern are you repeating because breaking it would require you to admit that everything you've been doing isn't working? I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I'm asking you to be honest about the questions. Because the questions are where transformation begins. The questions are where courage is born. The questions are where you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being the author of your story. When we refuse to let things end naturally, when we force relationships, situations, and versions of ourselves to continue past their expiration date, we create stagnation, we create resentment, we create a life that feels like we're swimming upstream against the current of our own evolution. And the exhaustion you feel, that bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, that's not because you're not strong enough. That's because you're using all your energy to fight against what wants to naturally occur. Think about a tree in autumn. Does the tree suffer because its leaves are changing color and falling? Does the tree resist the process, trying to hold on to summer forever? Of course not. The tree trusts the process. The tree knows that letting go of what was is the only way to make space for what's coming. The tree understands that death and rebirth are not opposite forces. They're part of the same cycle. But we humans, we've somehow convinced ourselves that we're exempt from natural law. We think we can skip seasons, avoid cycles, cheat the process of transformation. We think we can have spring without winter, growth without death, new life without letting the old life go. And then we wonder why we feel stuck, why we feel frustrated, why we feel like we're not making progress despite all our efforts. The resistance you feel when I talk about letting things end, that resistance is not protecting you. That resistance is not keeping you safe. That resistance is keeping you small. That resistance is the part of you that would rather stay in a familiar hell than risk an unfamiliar heaven. And I understand that resistance because I lived in it for years. I thought that holding on was strength. I thought that enduring was noble. I thought that staying was loyalty. But what I learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to have the courage to say, this isn't working anymore. This isn't serving anyone anymore. This chapter is complete. That doesn't mean you throw away everything at the first sign of difficulty. That doesn't mean you give up when things get challenging. That means you develop the wisdom to know the difference between a situation that's difficult but worth fighting for and a situation that's difficult because it's already dead and you're trying to resurrect something that doesn't want to be resurrected. How do you know the difference? Your body knows. Your intuition knows. That feeling in your stomach when you think about continuing on the current path, that's your inner wisdom speaking. That sense of heaviness, when you imagine another year of the same patterns, that's your soul telling you it's time for something different. That excitement you feel when you imagine what could be possible if you had the courage to let go, that's your future self calling you forward. But we've been conditioned to ignore these signals. We've been taught to override our intuition with logic, to dismiss our feelings as weakness, to push through discomfort instead of investigating what it's trying to tell us. We've been trained to be productive instead of aware, to be busy instead of present, to be strong instead of honest. And that training is killing us. Not physically, although the stress of living against our nature certainly takes a physical toll, but spiritually, emotionally, creatively, we're dying slow deaths of compromise, of settling, of accepting less than what we know in our hearts is possible. The path I'm describing to you, this journey of letting it end, letting it hurt, letting it heal, and letting it go, this isn't a one-time event. This is a way of living. This is a practice. This is how you stay alive, really alive, in a world that encourages numbness. This is how you keep growing in a culture that rewards staying the same. This is how you keep your heart open in an environment that teaches you to protect yourself at all costs. Every day there are small deaths and small births happening in your life. Every day there are opportunities to practice this principle. The conversation that needs to end, but you keep having it anyway. The habit that no longer serves you, but you keep doing it because it's familiar. The belief about yourself that you've outgrown, but you keep carrying it like an old photograph of someone you used to be. The beauty of this process is that it gets easier with practice. Not because the pain gets less intense. Sometimes it gets more intense because you're feeling it more fully instead of numbing it. But because you start to trust the process. You start to see that every ending really is a beginning in disguise. You start to understand that the universe isn't punishing you when things fall apart. It's preparing you for something better. I want to tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. I was sitting in a coffee shop watching people walk by on the street, and I suddenly realized that every single person I could see was carrying some kind of invisible burden. Everyone was dealing with their own version of holding on to something that needed to be released, and I felt this wave of compassion, not just for them, but for myself. For the first time, I understood that struggle isn't personal, pain isn't punishment. Endings aren't failures. They're just part of being human. They're just part of the curriculum of consciousness. They're just part of what it means to be alive and awake and growing in a world that's constantly changing. That realization shifted everything for me because it took the shame out of suffering. It took the judgment out of struggle. It took the story that something was wrong with me, that I was doing life incorrectly, that other people had figured out some secret that I was missing. The secret, it turns out, isn't avoiding the difficult parts of life. The secret is learning how to move through them with grace, with presence, with faith in the process. When you really understand this, when you really internalize this truth, your whole relationship with difficulty changes. Challenges become opportunities for growth instead of evidence that you're failing. Setbacks become redirections instead of punishments. Endings become doorways instead of walls. But here's where most people get stuck. They understand this concept intellectually, but they haven't learned how to apply it practically. They know they should let go, but they don't know how. They know they should feel their feelings, but they're terrified of what might happen if they really open that door. They know they should trust the process, but they've never learned what trust actually looks like in action. So let me get practical with you for a moment. Let me give you some real tools, some actual steps you can take to begin implementing this philosophy in your daily life. Because understanding is only the first step. Application is where transformation happens. First, you need to learn the difference between feeling your feelings and being your feelings. When pain arises, when sadness comes, when anger emerges, most people do one of two things. They either push it away immediately, or they become completely identified with it. Neither approach serves you. Feeling your feelings means creating space for the emotion to exist without trying to fix it, change it, or make it go away. It means being curious about what the feeling is trying to tell you instead of judging it as good or bad. It means breathing with the sensation instead of holding your breath against it. It means remembering that you are not the feeling, you are the one experiencing the feeling. This distinction is crucial because when you can hold space for difficult emotions without becoming them, you develop what I call emotional sovereignty. You realize that you can feel angry without becoming an angry person. You can feel sad without becoming a sad person. You can feel afraid without becoming a fearful person. You can feel the pain of an ending without becoming defined by that ending. The second tool is learning to distinguish between necessary pain and unnecessary pain. Necessary pain is the pain that comes with growth, with change, with letting go of what no longer serves you. This pain has a purpose, a direction, a teaching embedded within it. Unnecessary pain is the pain you create by resisting what's already happening, by fighting against reality, by trying to control things that are beyond your control. Necessary pain is temporary and transformative. Unnecessary pain is chronic and destructive. When you can make this distinction, you stop adding suffering to your pain. You stop making difficult situations worse by fighting against them. You learn to work with the natural flow of life instead of exhausting yourself swimming against the current. The third tool is developing what I call future vision. This is the ability to see beyond your current circumstances, to trust that there's something on the other side of this difficulty that you can't yet imagine. Future vision isn't about having all the answers or knowing exactly what's going to happen. It's about maintaining faith in possibility even when your current reality feels impossible. So when you're in the middle of an ending, when everything feels like it's falling apart, when you can't see how things could possibly get better, future vision is what keeps you moving forward. It's the voice that says, I don't know what's coming, but I trust that this breakdown is making space for a breakthrough. This isn't blind optimism or positive thinking. This is a deeper knowing that life is always moving in the direction of greater expansion, greater expression, greater evolution, even when it doesn't look that way, even when it feels like everything is going backwards, even when the evidence suggests other. The fourth tool is learning to surrender without giving up. There's a huge difference between these two approaches, and understanding this difference will save you years of unnecessary struggle. Giving up is passive, defeated, hopeless. Surrendering is active, empowered, faithful. When you give up, you stop taking action because you don't believe anything you do will matter. When you surrender, you continue taking inspired action while releasing attachment to specific outcomes. When you give up, you close your heart to protect yourself from further disappointment. When you surrender, you keep your heart open even though it might get broken again. Surrender is not about becoming passive or resigned. Surrender is about aligning your will with the larger intelligence that's orchestrating your life. It's about doing your part while trusting that there are forces beyond your control that are also working on your behalf. I learned this lesson the hard way when I was trying to force a particular outcome in my career. I had this vision of how things should unfold, and I was determined to make it happen exactly as I had imagined. I pushed, I manipulated, I exhausted myself trying to control every variable. And the more I pushed, the more resistance I encountered. Finally, I reached a point of complete exhaustion. I realized I had two choices. I could keep fighting against reality, or I could surrender to what was actually trying to emerge in my life. I chose surrender, not because I was giving up on my dreams, but because I was willing to let my dreams evolve beyond what I had originally imagined. What happened next was magical. Opportunities began to appear that I never could have planned or predicted. Doors opened that I didn't even know existed. People came into my life who were perfectly aligned with where I was heading. But more importantly, I started enjoying the journey instead of just enduring it. This brings me to the fifth tool, learning to find meaning in the process, not just in the destination. We've been conditioned to believe that life is about reaching certain milestones, achieving certain goals, accumulating certain experiences. But what if I told you that the real richness of life isn't in the destinations you reach, but in who you become while you're traveling toward them? Every ending you go through, every pain you feel, every healing you experience, every release you make, all of these are shaping you into someone new. They're developing capacities within you that you didn't know you had. They're revealing strengths you didn't know you possessed. They're preparing you for opportunities you can't yet imagine. When you start to see your struggles as curriculum instead of punishment, everything changes. When you start to understand that your pain is not random but purposeful, you can work with it instead of against it. When you realize that your challenges are not obstacles to your growth, but vehicles for your growth, you can embrace them instead of avoiding them. The sixth tool is developing what I call witnessing consciousness. This is the ability to observe your thoughts, feelings, and reactions without being completely consumed by them. It's like having an inner observer that can step back and see the bigger picture, even when you're in the middle of chaos. Witnessing consciousness is what allows you to say, I notice I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, instead of I am overwhelmed. It's what helps you recognize having thoughts about failure instead of I am a failure. It's what enables you to observe I'm experiencing grief instead of I am grief-stricken. This might sound like a subtle distinction, but it's actually revolutionary. When you can witness your experience instead of being completely identified with it, you create space for choice. You realize that you don't have to be at the mercy of every emotion that arises. You understand that you can be in pain without being destroyed by it. You discover that you can feel afraid without being paralyzed by fear. Developing witnessing consciousness takes practice, but it's one of the most liberating skills you can cultivate. It's what allows you to stay present with difficult experiences instead of getting lost in stories about what they mean. It's what helps you respond to challenges instead of just reacting to them. It's what enables you to find your center even when everything around you is in chaos. Now, let me address something that might be coming up for you as you listen to this. You might be thinking, this all sounds good in theory, but you don't understand my situation. You don't know how complicated my life is. You don't know how much I have to lose if I start letting things go. And you're right. I don't know your specific circumstances. I don't know the particular challenges you're facing. I don't know the unique complexities of your situation.